Hello, wonderful to be here with you. My name is Anna Valtonen and I'll be your moderator for this session. I hope we have a wonderful session of new education for a changing world together ahead of us here today, this afternoon. My own background is in Aalto University. My field is in design, and with design we talk about changing the world, about creating things from one to achieve a better solution for the future. And I think that's partly what we're going to do, all of us together here today, to look at what we can with education and learning and teaching, and how we can turn this into a better place together. Because at Aalto University, we are about combining different areas and different fields. So we have the sciences and technology together with the business and the art. And we believe in this idea of transdisciplinarity, where we can find solutions and find angles into these things that we didn't know existed before. So that's a little bit what we'll aim at doing here as well. We've got three approaches that we apply to everything we do. We talk about finding solutions for sustainability. We talk about radical creativity, about the capacity to think completely differently, and about an entrepreneurial mindset, about actually doing something about these things. And I think we'll touch on a few of these together today, all of us here on the stage and you in the audience with us. So, if we think about universities, it is all about building the future, isn't it? We talk about how we educate students, what they are, how they will be preparing for a life in the working life, maybe for decades to come. Also with our art and science, it's about how we can do groundbreaking areas, new novel thinking for decades to come. But today, it won't actually be about future only from a university point of view. It's actually going to be us challenging ourselves to see education in a way broader sense, not about just young people, but really for all of us. Because just 1 month ago, the World Economic Forum, they released a really comprehensive Future of Jobs survey for 2023. And according to that report, for example, the demand for AI and machine learning specialists and sustainability specialists are experiencing a rapid growth, and they said that we should reskill, imagine it or not, 1 billion individuals for the future. And still I'm not quite sure if even that is enough. I think we need a broader mindset change. So let's see what we can create together here today. We all know that the challenges are huge because the working life will change, the future of the jobs will change, and we've heard a lot of facts and figures, I think. All of you've been attending these sessions. There's so much information around. But the real core thing is, how can we act on this? How can we actually do something that will change? Every individual, each of us, do something that is different than before. So today we'll be talking about the future, what we should be teaching and learning, but also about what skills and ways of living do we actually value. I'll invite with me up here on the stage experts from different corners of the world, where we will first start with two keynote speeches, one by Esther Goodwin-Brown and one by Risto Sarvas. Then we will have a panel. We'll also engage you. We'll very strongly engage our student thinkers to see what they think about the future. And after all of this, hopefully we can go home from here with an idea of how we can all act on this. So I encourage all of you to really think with this mindset of a radical creativity, to see if you can find something that you haven't thought of before and something that you can really take with you to take further from here. Because that's also a little bit of, I'll put a little bit on the weight on you actually, so if you just sit and listen, I don't think too many things in the world change. But if you actually do something and take with you at least a seed of, that I could do, that's a new thought, then I think we have all gained a lot from today. So I'm looking forward for a good and feisty and really great discussion for all of us. So let's get started then. So first up, we will have two keynote speakers. we'll start with Esther Goodwin-Brown, who's the lead of the Circular Jobs Initiative at Circular Economy. She'll talk about the skills gap in vocational education and training. She leads a program that's focused on creating transformative tools for governments and other public agencies and ensuring the circular economy is positive for work and workers. And after her, we will listen to our Professor of Practice, Risto Sarvas, who claims that he's actually not an expert on circular economy. So why have we then invited him? Well, he's actually suggesting a paradigm shift to education. So he, I think, embodies Aalto University's core idea, where his career and history combines the design, the business, the technology, the societal perspectives, and he's been awarded as a researcher and a service designer and university teacher and you name it. And he's currently leading one of our programs for bachelors and masters on information networks, which blends software, design, business, and so many other areas. So I think after we've been, we can hear these two, then we can go on and be inspired by you. So please, Esther, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Anna, and it's a pleasure to be with you all today to talk about the transformative power of vocational education and training. But first, I wonder how many of us have looked at images like these and made some assumptions. Assumptions about the level of skill required for these jobs, assumptions about where in the world the most meaningful circular economy activities are usually found, assumptions about the value that these occupations bring to society as a whole. At Circular Economy Foundation, we believe to achieve a circular economy at the pace we need and one that works for everyone, we need to rethink how we value different sorts of jobs, people, skills, and forms of education in the circular economy. And that includes busting some of these myths. From our work with textile sorters, for example, we know that although an engineer is classed as a much more highly skilled job, sorters have vast knowledge and skills that often go unrecognized. A manual sorter in the textiles industry, for example, has to sort between up to and sometimes over 300 grades of materials, making a decision about the product's quality and appropriate end market in just 3 to 5 seconds. We also know that although countries in the global north are seen to be leading on the circular economy transition, doing things in a circular way is nothing new in many parts of the world, and that we should actually be looking to learn from and scale many of these practices rather than always starting afresh. And we also know that when it comes to valuing different sorts of jobs, just like these, and the value that they bring to society, many jobs at the end of the value chain, their contribution is often largely hidden. And this is in part due to the fact that many of these jobs exist around the world in the informal sector, a sector that's hidden from formal databases. It's not picked up largely by our statistical bureaus, but employs 60% or over of the global workforce and plays a central role in circular economy activities. Not only sorting, but upcycling clothing, transporting and reselling goods for reuse. In 2019, at Circular Economy, we conducted some research to compare linear and circular jobs in terms of the training and education they required. And what we found is that jobs in the circular economy, when compared to their linear counterparts, require much more hands-on learning and practical work experience. For example, an engineer working in the production of renewable energy requires, on average, 2 more years of on-the-job training, scoring substantially higher on their need for hands-on practical learning than jobs when you compare them in the rest of the economy. But when we were putting this research out there, what we found was that a lot of the circular economy movement was really focused on higher education. And this sparked us to look deeper at the providers of this hands-on learning and to really think about what their role is in enabling the circular economy. So in 2021, we embarked on a study looking at the potential of vocational education and training, or VET, to both respond to the needs of the circular economy and be a driver of innovation and behavior change. And through this research, we found that vocational training can be a powerful tool for reaching societal goals, including closing the skills gap for the circular economy. And so how does it do this? It has strong links with industry, and it can be a powerful demonstrator of the hands-on skills needed on the job, especially in countries that have a market-driven curriculum, so they're working directly with industry to set the course of what they're teaching. It can be offered in a modular way, giving workers and employers the flexibility to reskill and upskill on specific areas and keep up with the pace of change. It can also contribute to better quality jobs through teaching essential elements like health and safety standards and safe ways of operating at work. And what we also found is that these institutions can be an important vehicle for social inclusion. They're typically open to everyone across skill levels, and they often play a really vital role in active labour market policies that national governments use to target interventions towards people that are distant from the labour market and encourage them into work and training. Since putting this research out there, we've also been working directly with trainers in vocational schools across a number of countries. And from this, we've uncovered something really interesting. I'm sure you've seen out there in research and dialogues that there's a lot of focus on pinpointing the specific skills needed for the circular economy, this golden bullet. If we know the skills, then we can make it happen. But what has come out as probably most important is in order to achieve this large-scale upskilling of the workforce that Anna introduced, we need to look at the capacity and the readiness of our schools, colleges, and institutions themselves. Their ability to teach the right skills, their ability to work with the government and with industry to react to the needs of the market and the policy being fed down, the ability of teachers themselves to adapt to the pace of change and how learning is evolving. Here in Finland, you might know that there is a movement towards climate change education, and it's getting climate change literacy embedded across all subjects and levels of education. And what I find really exciting about this example is the focus isn't just on what climate change literacy is and what skills students need to learn. It's also the capacity of teachers and educators themselves and how they should be teaching these skills. And it's these insights that have sparked us to embark on a new study in partnership with the International Centre for Vocational Education and Training to look at the capacity gaps that institutions in the vocational system are experiencing when it comes to upskilling for the circular economy, so that they can be better placed to help close the gap. So summarising some of the key takeaways. Jobs, skills, and people are a key enabler of the circular economy. We need to bust some of the myths that we have about education and skills and really rethink how we value different types of skills and education and see this as part of the mindset shift that we're all undergoing as we transition towards the circular economy. VET has an important role to play alongside higher education and other informal forms of learning in closing the skills gap for the circular economy, but also making the transition inclusive to everyone. And most importantly, we need to look at not only the capacity of ourselves, but our institutions, not only in education, but also in the public, in the private sector, so that they can too adapt and keep up with the pace of change in order to really truly transform our behaviours, our industries, and our economies at large. Thank you for your attention. Handing over to Risto.
Thank you, Esther. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Risto, really happy to be here. And I guess one of the big questions, let me ask you first, how many of here you kind of feel that you work in an educational sector? Oh, not even half of you. Very interesting. I do. So like Anna said, I work at the Aalto University. So that's definitely my background, and my worldview comes from the educational world. But I guess one of the big questions here today about this session is that what are the actual skills needed for the circular economy or the big changes, sustainability and all that? And what needs to change in education so that we can address these big issues? Well, I'll give you my answer right now. My answer is the plumbing has to change. And that's it. Thank you very much. What do I mean by this plumbing? In other words, I think the whole learning, teaching, education infrastructure has to change. And I like the metaphor of plumbing because here you can see and already start thinking that the changes that need to happen are not just that we keep the same pipes, the same ways of learning, same ways of teaching, and just pour new content inside. That's not enough. But we actually need a major overhaul. And if you're thinking that a major overhaul is something really, really big and requires a lot, and just to remind all of us, whether you work in education or not, we've been just through one actual big learning overhaul. I'm not sure if I can say this, but thanks to the pandemic, we all had to learn very quickly. Our jobs had to change, and we kind of saw learning new skills and tools and everything in a new light. And now with the next catastrophes coming with the global economy and the war going on, we're kind of seeing that we need to adapt all the time, and that's all about learning, isn't it? So we have been all through one major overhaul, so kind of can we keep the momentum and at least look at education from different perspectives because of that? And the things we learned, and I'm sure you agree, one of the things is that like I said, learning is our job. In our jobs, and a lot of our jobs are knowledge-related, knowledge-centric jobs. We need to learn. We need to adapt all the time. And if you sit down and think about it even more, you could even think that your job actually is learning. Think about all the artificial intelligence and the technology and the automation that has happened. How much at the end of the day, the role for us working with knowledge is actually that our job is to learn if everything else is automated, to put it bluntly. And I think the other thing we learned about the remote working was that this is not just a plugging. The change in the way we learn things, it's not just a small thing that we can add and then move on. So it's not just like, let's take this extra course and then we're all done with it and all the other courses remain the same. If I use a school as an example. But this must be embedded in the way we do. So if we talk about circular economy, sustainability, most of the people on this planet will never be experts on these topics, and I don't think they should be. But whatever they do, it's somehow their education and skills and knowledge has to have a new angle and perspective into them, those things. And the third one is that I guess we all agree that all of this learning has to be collective. It has to be kind of thought as a bigger thing. It's not just that we should retrain and reskill all of those individuals as individuals, but look at the whole thing as a collective learning. That as a group we have these skills and knowledge. As a group we can do these things, which means that not all of us need to have exactly the same education. Anyway, some of you, or maybe most of you, are waiting for me to give the answer to this question. So can you please just tell us what the skills, and Esther had a good examples here and mentioned a lot of things that need to be done. Well, if you're asking that question, I still think that you're looking at the plumbing. You're not really rethinking the plumbing here. You're not taking a step back and kind of looking at what does the plumbing really try to achieve here. But okay, how to rethink the whole plumbing then? So I give you three things to think about. I think one of the first one is obvious, but somehow very easily forgotten, especially for us working in education institutions. We should actually focus on learning, not on teaching. That, for example, I come from a university, everything, we are employed based on how we teach. We're measured based on how we teach. We have a vice rector of teaching. We don't have a vice rector of learning. I think that's kind of strange, isn't it? Because it's all about learning at the end of the day, isn't it? And the other kind of obvious thing that maybe I just need to point out is that when it goes to the real jobs, getting real things done, where we need skills to solve problems. But if you look at traditional education, it's all about training people, all the way from kids to young adults. It's all about teaching them in a way that they actually pass exams. The whole system is made that individuals learn skills, that they pass exams and get a certificate, and then they are employed. And then the third one, which is perhaps obvious as well, but really important, because I think we need to really re-look at this, that workplaces are actually a place of learning. I think most of the world still thinks that we have the school. Of course, young children go to school, then they become teenagers, and then they become young adults. And then the school ends, and then they go and work somewhere. There is still this division between places where you learn and places where you work, and then you visit them sometime during your career. Anyway, there is a strict division there. So, like I said, that if we take a step back, I think we need to think about more like a garden. That the first thing to think is that we focus on the people, the learners, and how they grow. Yes, we need plumbing. There needs to be teaching systems and all of that. But we need to start rethinking about it. And the infrastructural change I'm talking about is something like this. We need plumbing. I'm not saying we don't need teaching, but we need to re-look at it from angles of what kind of teaching environments we have, what kind of tools we are. But the focus should be on the big picture, on the learners, on the people. Just like gardeners, the focus is on the plants and what is growing, and kind of the plumbing and everything that is there to help that out. So to sum up my keynote talk, provocative or not, is as simple as this. But this thing actually, the more you look at it, it requires a bigger change. We need change from a teaching infrastructure more towards actually a learning infrastructure. So from plumbing to gardening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Esther and Risto. I think that was a great start. So Esther showed us all the vocational skills we should think about when we come to the circular economy. Risto showed us that we should actually question the whole way we learn, and that we all are engaged in this. And now I think it's time also to include our students' voices. So throughout the panel and the discussion, we've actually invited many of our students to share their thoughts with them, because it's an honest truth at the moment that most of our students, they actually feel that there's a huge gap between, their desired future and what we actually have at the moment. So how should we understand them? What is it that actually worries them? And then we will be inviting 4 brilliant people up here on stage where we've actually asked, or we will be asking all of them and challenging them a little bit to find something good and new opportunities in what these students are asking from us. So please, I'd like to invite up here with me on stage all our wonderful 4 roundtable speakers. We have Joseph, we have Gerdon, we have Esther, and we have Risto. Please join me up here on stage. So I'll start with some quick introductions of Joseph, for example. Joseph Adelegan, I hope I'm doing it.
You're correct, yeah.
Close at least.
Yes,
Please have a seat.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe I should as well, so you don't feel uncomfortable. But anyway, so Joseph, you head the largest global community in the rubber economy, which comprises 34 member governments and the EU. So that's pretty huge. And before that, you've actually been a professor at the University of Venda in South Africa, a United Nations official, an international development expert, and a practitioner scholar in management with distinguished careers and 2 doctorates, and I could go on for a long, long time here. I think that's really prestigious, and I'm super happy to have you here.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Yeah.
And we have Gerdon Batra, who's a design technologist, at the Dark Matter Labs, you combine different crafts in your practice. You have systems thinking, you have rapid prototyping, speculative, critical design, data justice, tech materiality, all of these things that we're just, wanting to learn more about. But you also have a background in computer science and new media design, and you have held multidisciplinary roles in all sorts of industries and different size companies all over the US, Europe, and India. So I am very happy to have
Thank
you
you.
here.
It's my pleasure to be here.
It's wonderful. And then we've had the pleasure to already meet Esther and Risto. So this is the lot that you'll have with you today. But actually, I think Risto did something smart there in the very beginning. He asked about which of you were in education, but I'd like to know a little bit more. So before we start, I'd actually like to know where you come from. So, ready? Please raise your hand if you come from an NGO. Quite a few. Great. What about an educational institution? I think that's many of you too. Great. Public sector? Hey, I wonder if you're in many at once or how we have so many hands. That's great. Any students around? That's good. I think we should all raise our hand on that one. At least I am. What about, did I miss something? Something else? I did miss something. Good. Business? Yes. That one's definitely, I missed that one actually. That was all even on the list. What about business and industry? Okay, that's a lot of you. Great. All right, wonderful. But I think that gives us a good idea of where you come from, a very broad set of backgrounds as well. So we'll try to answer all of those together with answering the questions from our students mostly from Finland and Tanzania are the students that we have who are asking us really critical questions. And they will be keep rolling on behind us so that you don't feel surprised when they changed. But if we start with this very first one, I think there's a lot of critique at the moment from our students who want more of a regenerative and, a less greedy business logic in different ways. And they're questioning our pursuit for endless growth. And it's not a very easy one, I think, for companies. But I'd like to start with Gordon, because you have all these approaches of thinking of things systemically, and also with an urban planning view and so on. What could our companies do, or how can we approach this? Where do we start?
Yeah, first of all, we have to accept that it is not an easy task at hand. It's not going to, flick a finger and things will change. I read this when it came up, right? Like it was saying, we are missing the normal, but when were things normal? Like, I don't remember when there was no war, when there was no shortages, people were not, there was no normal. I think it's just a trick played on our mind. But yes, we need a holistic change, yeah? And I really like the metaphor you put forward, the plumbing system. What about the plumbing system of the business world, right? Where, we need to change the whole thing, but we cannot do it at the same time, right? So we need to, figure out which parts, we start with and how one by one we can take them out. And things like greed and things like growth addiction, you cannot blame the corporates individually, but it's the whole system which is the problem, right? Mm-hmm. So where do we start, right? I know it's a bit... It's hard to form a holistic view when we are so, our minds are so engrossed already by the corporates, because they run the world, right? Everything, our clothes and our phones, it's all created by them. So it's really hard to stop and break down. And we are also scared. I think I was having a conversation today and I said, hey, I think we are being a bit too nice to corporates in the morning. We are saying, hey, we need to cater to them. We need to make sure they're happy. The new normal is they are firing people and recessions are going on at the same time. So we need to be a bit more critical, right? We need to say no, things they can't just go on as they are going on. We need to slowly break these problems down to smaller bits and solve them one by one.
Maybe we could add those then onto Esther's list, where you would have on the skills list, you would have your systemic thinking maybe as one. I think Esther was getting at that. Then you would have your criticality, your approach to think.
Right. And
maybe even a speculative approach of what could be, or imagining, or...
I definitely agree. Especially the last one, the speculative approach, because, a lot of these things again, because we think this is how things are and this is how it can be, there's no way possible. But speculative design and storytelling, especially storytelling, it brings in, also we need non-experts to start thinking about it. We don't need, like you said, I'm also don't think of myself as a climate, circular economy, expert. But having or other skill sets and coming together and thinking of a story together, at least we start somewhere, right? At least we start imagining a different alternative way, and yeah, totally agree.
What do you think, Esther? Could we add these on your list? Does it make any sense?
Yeah, indeed. Well, I'm very for not having a fixed list. I think there's an agreement that like foundational transversal skills that you can apply across any industry are key for any change, particularly the circular economy. But the skill set is always going to change. So I'm a big advocate of let's not label things circular skills. The application is what's key, and it's what you put your efforts and your mind to. And I also wanted to add, I think when it comes to the role of companies, I think it's also helpful to think of companies also as teachers in a way, because they influence our behavior. And also consciously taking that on as part of your strategy in the way that you're marketing your work and thinking that, yeah, you have influence on behavior that way, and obviously doing that for the good rather than the bad. So it's not just our schools and colleges where we learn, as you say. We learn through our friends, our family, and through the companies and the businesses around us.
I think you just added, I understand your idea of not wanting a list, but I have to still collect one on an imaginative list that we can then decide we don't need. But you said something very smart there. You said that it's about behaviors, about changing our behaviors. And I think that one's a really good one, having on there as well. So Joseph, can I continue with you on that then? Because okay. I think quite a few of these, we have both Elizabeth and Suna here who have been, saying that sometimes it's not actually a choice. So we might have things like energy solutions that we know there are options, but in our everyday life, if we live in such conditions, they might not be choices we can make. So how can we then, they pointed out that a cheaper, environmentally harmful option often is the one that wins out in practice. And it's not only a behavioral choice, it's the fact that they can't. They don't have the option to choose the better energy option. What could we do about that? How can we go about it?
Thank you very much. I think the major issue here is a paradigm shift. In the way, in the concept by which we view learning. I think learning in this concept of circular economy should be more of a lifelong learning. I draw experience when I work for Development Finance Institution, and we're funding a couple of projects in the African countries, and then trying to introduce improved energy solutions in these countries, and then changing them from changing from deforestation and them changing from firewood using improved cook stoves. And a couple of these countries in Africa refuse to change. And I think it's not only because they don't have alternatives. Yes, they don't have alternatives. In some cases, it's a case of no alternative, and they are used to what they do using inefficient energy solutions. But in this case, we actually provide alternatives for them to change from deforesting and then change it to improve cooking. They actually refused to change. And then when they insist that they must use what they are using, which of course affect young children, affect lungs and all kinds of things. But when we actually dig deep to understand why they don't want to change, for example, it will interest to know that some of them say that when we cook with wood, the food is actually sweeter. But that is not the case. It's a case of behavioral change. So I think it's more about lifelong learning and what content we can introduce along the learning phase of life here.
I think that's really interesting. So could the fact that they feel that it actually tastes sweeter, could it also be about getting about cultural change? There's so much heritage and sort of hidden cultural aspects that are tied into these traditions that it's keeping us again from seeing.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. I think what we did at that time was not to force them to use gas for cooking. And then we actually do what we call improved cook stove. That means they are still using what they are using, improved charcoal technologies, which we introduce because of this fear that they are used to. And they are more quick to adopt that than to move to the more innovative solutions like gas solutions. Yeah. So about how you learn along these spheres, behavioral change, lifelong learning, and different aspects of their lives. Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful analogy, though, because it makes me think of when we talk about, in many of our countries, we've talked a lot about fashion and how we still express ourselves with that and how we need to find new solutions around it. But it's largely very much cultural, isn't it? Expressing yourself through certain things. And how can you do that in a way which is, more novel and more new thinking rather than just the fast fashion and so on. So it's a brilliant idea to think of it as a cultural aspect. What do you think, Risto, about that?
Yeah, I was listening and thinking quite a lot of things. I think we live in a world where we're so much looking at solutions that are, I would call them, on a surface level. Mm-hmm. So we're coming up with innovations, or we're coming up with quick solutions, and we want them to be tangible. But many of the things that actually that if you want really big systemic change, you need to go deeper. You need to go to the, pardon me of repeating myself, you need to go to the infrastructure level and the cultural level. And those are typically invisible things. You cannot point your finger at them. You cannot make a business model necessarily there. But those are the things that need to change, whether it's the business ecosystem, whether it's the technical infrastructures, whether it is the cultural infrastructures that we're doing. And so me coming from an engineering school, it's actually a big change that we have to teach or maybe unlearn for young adults is that, if you really want to change the world, it's not but coming up with a clever app on a mobile phone, or it's not coming up with a new stove for burning wood. But if you really want to change, then you need to take a step back. You need to understand infrastructure, you need to understand culture, you need to start understanding business ecosystems, and that's where the change happens, and the lever of changing the world is much bigger.
That's a good analogy. So a huge lever that goes from just having solutions to what you said was then going into systemic and cultural and ecosystem thinking, right? And unlearning old habits. I think that was a really, really smart one to do. And actually, I think it's also a little bit, when I look at what our students are saying, it is a little bit the same thing that it feels like, I think, that they are trying to get on as well. Because many of them, I think if you look at here, both at Rachel and Merituuli and Alfeo, they're talking a lot about this sort of ignorance that we have to our current, to where we have a consumer-driven culture at the moment, where, although it is a huge pressing concern, they're saying that our current norms, our regulations, our, the way we, infrastructures, like you said, that they're actually the ones that keep us from seeing what we could do differently. So I think, as always, they're smarter than me at least, but most likely any one of us who's been out for a longer time to see how we can re-question that. But that's maybe also how can we get to this then? How can we get skills and capabilities of people to be systemic and see more perspective? Esther wants to go.
Yeah,
give it a shot.
I think a lot of these quotes, I can feel the frustration in many of the students, and I think we can all agree now is a really hard time to be a student and to be learning and to moving out into the world of work. And I think some of that frustration I felt lies, and maybe that's my personal frustration as well, is that we can't just give people the skills or teach them this is the alternative or this is the sustainable, this is the sustainable way to do it and expect people to take that up. There really needs to be a business case. It needs to be beneficial for every individual. We all know in any part of the world, we don't just ride a bike because it's good for the climate. You do it because there's safe roads, or it's a cheaper alternative, or there's health benefits that you've been taught about. So I think it's also making sure there's a connection between what we're saying at maybe the policy level around what the direction is that we need to go and the lifestyles that we need to adhere to, and actually the infrastructure that's, to use it in a slightly different way, the infrastructure that's in place to support those choices. and to support that type of learning mindset, that sort of curiosity. So I think it's not so simple as knowledge doesn't necessarily mean behavior change. We need tools to help people change their behavior as well, and different sorts of awareness campaigns and learning and teaching to support that.
Yeah. I think that's a good balance as well. How much can we drive on, is it policy or is it individual or a lot of this thinking? You look like you want to add.
Yes. Just like we had the other time when the keynote speech on Beyond Plumbing.
Yeah.
If you draw a lesson from Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the pioneer for circular economy, and they were introducing some lessons on education into the circular economy. And the first set of education introduced an MBA program in innovation and in circular economy at the University of Bradford in the UK. And after that, they came up with some open source learning courses. And after that, they have these 138 courses that were drawn all across the world. And the focus is beyond engineering. They move in that 138 courses that is designed across the world on circular business and design. And I think these are critical skills. For example, we need a skill that will move up beyond cradle to grave to cradle to cradle, where we can actually design systems to eliminate, for example, waste. And we need skill in the area of circular business. For example, people will adopt circularity, business will adopt circularity if they can understand the inherent economic benefits in it. If you can improve the triple bottom line, they will adopt it. That is a model that was designed by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which I believe it could be a model of learning, lifelong learning, that can be incorporated in several studies. And if you see this learning, I think it was incorporated in 2018, and it's spreading now. We have those courses in English, in Finnish, in Chinese, and in Dutch. And about 38% of those courses are actually in Finland and Netherlands. They actually spread 15% in the UK, 11% in China, and 7% in the United States. So it's going beyond engineering and engineering solution to systemic change, to design, and also circularity in terms of business. So these are critical skills that we can actually incorporate to our lifelong learning in circularity. Yeah.
So engineering to systemic and then creating a business around that. I think that was pretty well sort of put together. I'm still wondering about this, where we make the biggest difference though, whether it's institutions or individuals or someone. Maybe this is actually a good point to activate you a little bit, to see what you think. So I think, should we all actually just stand up? Let's do it, all of us. Come on, up. So I think then, let's see, if all of you think that the challenge here is actually individuals, or what we do, then raise your hand. Could individuals do different things? Or if you think it's the institutions, then remain standing. And if you think it's societal norms, the culture, then do sit down.
Like a mix.
That's a tough one. I'm putting all of you to think. Individuals, you can also do the combo, half and half. You can remain standing, raise your hand if you think it's individuals, remain standing without a hand if you think it's the institutions, and if you think the problem is the societal norms, then do sit down.
What if it's all three?
Then you need to do a Gurdon kind of combo.
Dancing?
So what is it? What do we have? I'm surprised. Very few hands. Are we really that? Isn't it? Well, we get more hands. More individuals that can affect. Quite a few institutions, people standing. But a huge amount of you actually thinking that it's societal norms. I think this one's quite interesting, and I think this is something that we can tackle. Thank you for going forward into the questions, because if, like it seems from the audience, it's actually the societal norms and the culture and the way, things are in society that keeps us back, then that's maybe one of the keys into the new educational bits then to how can we think that. All right, let's move into tougher ones then. If these were the easy ones, I think our students, they talk a lot about waste, about how we treat things with less respect than we should, I think. And I can see a lot of things happening even in my lifespan. I remember how we treated things. We could throw things away a lot more a while back, and there has clearly been a paradigm shift. We see it with the shift from fast fashion and many of these fast food or instant messaging, for that case, anything, the fast cultures of that. But can we actually, get rid of trash, or how much can we think circular? Out of the students, Jason was calling for a repair culture and Merituli was asking for less consumption. What do you think? I think, Esther, you talked about this one a little bit. How far can we go? How much can we rethink? How can we, if it is our culture more than our, I'm really still intrigued by your answer. I was thinking that it would be way more us, that we as individuals. On the other hand, I mean, who creates culture if not us? So maybe it's a circular question as well, as much as circular economy. I can see a few nods. How can we beat that culture of throwing away things?
I think it's not going to be easy.
Good.
We've seen, just like the evidence that lots of our behaviors were causing the planet to heat over 50 years ago. We haven't changed much in that time. In fact, lots of our behaviors and the global movement is moving in the wrong direction. But it's not impossible. And I think it just really requires coming down to values, really, and having a proper conversation about how do we value, what do we value in society, how do we value the things that we can touch and the things that we can't. And trying to embed those into the sorts of things you do in your daily life, but also the types of teaching, the way that you influence those around you, and how that is followed through by institutions and through society. I mean, our system change experts here on the stage might have some other ideas about how you actually permeate a value shift. But it's appealing to, people's innate value, which we know is not, people aren't innately wasteful. It's because, like I said before, that's the accessible and the affordable option often. So even though they might value something that has a longer lifetime, getting something fixed, for example, in Amsterdam, one of the countries that we've heard many times today has the most ambitious circular economy strategy in the world, it's impossible to get a kettle fixed.
Yeah.
But
isn't this? I'm pushing. Maybe I'm the one that's not the expert. You're way better on this than me. But I'm still coming back to your answer of it being culture rather than because I think this fashion discussion is really intriguing in that, and the circular areas. And Josef, your point about it becoming business is when it becomes, when it actually happens. And we see so much of it today, I think, with our students. I mean, of course, they create completely new materials together where they, make something more sustainable that way. But there's also a lot of new business models where the vintage and the circular clothing are way more cool, coming back to your culture, creating a way of thinking which is more attractive than actually going and buying something that's going to be replaced 3 months later on. So can we actually affect it both? I think that's that. This one, it's bubbling.
We need to create like new forms of incentivization, right?
Exactly.
First, incentivization needs to be there.
Yeah.
And looking at the slide which Esther showed, first of all, you need to put money on like these kind of jobs are considered low value, unsexy, and we need to change that cultural that mind shift. And I have to also say, growing up in India, repair culture was part of the game. Like, my mom used to take me to the tailor every other Sunday, and there was this going on. I now see those trends coming back, but, growing up, it was all about that. So it's also, we have to understand, it's not one-size-fits-all solution throughout the world, right? We have to understand the cultural nuances first. and then make a local change-making team which kind of understands and feeds back to the system. And lastly, I have to say, some institutes, they just make things by design, not to be repaired. Finally, after all this fighting with Apple, now they have made their phone which can be repaired, but still we're not there. But also, and being at Aalto, there was so much maker culture, fab labs, and I think there's something combination of these things together. It's what we're looking for, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you touched on something important there as well. Also, we talked about the importance of having different perspectives from different fields and different ways of thinking. But also, I think the cultural things, there's something in coming back in actually appreciating and learning what different cultures are strong at.
Right.
So if, in India might be way ahead of Finland, for example, in repair culture.
Right.
So should we learn, and where can we, who's strongest, and where can we see that?
Right.
So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, to me, I think the aspect of culture is quite strong when we talk of circularity. There are two parts to it. We've talked about the 5 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle, regenerate, restoration, all that. But looking at the concept of culture in terms, for example, repair and all that, in this part of the world, circularity becomes more easier because reuse is common here. In some part of the world, reuse culturally is not acceptable. People think you reuse items because you are at the base of the pyramid.
Yeah.
So people think that if you are at the top of the pyramid, you don't really reuse, you use new things. So culturally, I think there's a need for some education in terms of culture, especially in places like Africa, where, people, the cultural instinct is different from this part of the world. Then secondly, beside the issue of waste prevention, reduce, reuse, I mentioned the other time that there has to be the concept of designing out waste. I talked about early Mercator Foundation when they moved beyond engineering to look at design and circular business. And that the new trend in terms of education, in terms of learning, is to move from cradle to grave to cradle to cradle, where from manufacturing point of view, you can begin to have a systemic design where waste are designed out, where the waste of one industry become a resource for another industry, where you have this industrial symbiosis, closed loop production, so that if we move to that level of understanding in a curriculum in terms of our education along the lifelong learning, we can actually design out waste completely. But that would take a very long time. We are at this point in the history of circularity, where we'll talk about the 5 R's, reduce, repair, and all that. But I think the new world we are looking at is a world where you actually design out waste. Yeah.
But that's great. I mean, if we come to this lifelong learning, and it's all up to us to change a culture, because that's what you said was the cause of all of this. How do we do that? And why are we not doing it if we're not? There's a lot that's still wrong out there. How can we do learning for changing a culture? What's that? Risto?
I think the time is running out, not of this panel, but of these changes. So I would kind of, listening to all those comments, I think we just need a holistic approach. We need as much carrots as incentives for change, but I think there's more stick required at the moment. I think it's
Sorry, there's what? There's more?
More stick.
Stick.
Yeah, so
Yes.
I think we all know that regulation is coming, and I think that's actually a fantastic thing, that we can see the change doesn't happen fast enough. Everything happens, when there's a law, there's a regulation, and we can see, for example, in carbon neutrality, things are happening very soon because there are certain EU-level laws that companies need to abide to. And the same, I think, applies to whether it's an individual institution or societal norm. It's that if we try to solve, we need to start on each levels. And then the locality of it, the different kind of cultures. I think there's a big kind of, how should I say, facilitation exercise of communicating that why do we need this change. But kind of my personal opinion, or maybe even a professional opinion, is that, time for talk is over. Now it's time that, we gave everybody a chance to change, not fast enough. Now it's time to regulate. And then we need to, then the universe starts bending around those regulations, to put it very simply.
No, but that's a great point. That maybe comes back to Gordon's point of having a system, and your piping point of having a systemic approach of it, of understanding where it is you can do individuals, business solutions or changes, where you need to change regulations, where it is the culture that's keeping us back. Maybe that's also a tool set that we could almost have to be able to somehow understand what's what in all of this, particularly if you are young, so that it doesn't feel overwhelming, but that you can actually, sort somehow the Lego blocks out, that this might need more regulation.
Can I add quickly something? We talked earlier about we started with the businesses,
yes.
What's their role in it. And I think somebody mentioned to me, and I thought was really smart, was that businesses are typically really good at implementing strategies. That's what really good businesses are. Mm-hmm. And now with the regulation, I'm very actually optimistic and looking at a lot of businesses, how they do change, because I think as organizations, they are the best in implementing change. And the regulation might be exactly the thing that pushes them to perhaps change the values or change the goals and the objectives they're looking for. But once they kind of put the objectives and the goals in place, I think as organizations, businesses are extremely efficient getting things done. So I kind of bring an optimistic twist into this role of businesses.
That's great. I think now all of you are burning to talk. So I think if we take Esther and Joseph and Gordon in that order, then we...
Yeah, I wanted to also come back to the how do we achieve this cultural shift. It's not necessarily the answer, but I think it's also looking at the quotes from the students and thinking about the movement and the desire for change that we feel in the global student population. We saw it with Fridays for the Future over the last few years, is also really empowering those young people with their knowledge of how we got here, what the issues are that are underlying the systems and the issues that we see today. So integrating not just climate literacy, but climate justice, bringing some realism to why we're here and why it's so hard to make the changes, but then also some optimism by empowering people with that knowledge that we can see some of the issues that we would like to right. We don't have necessarily all of the answers about how you can carefully do that part by part in the system, but the intention and the will is there with many actors to do it. So balancing some realism and optimism, and being very clear about what has led us here and what that could teach us for where we go next.
That was good. Balancing realism and optimism and actually giving a direction to people. I wish I could get that on a plaque.
You should.
Yeah.
Yes, to me, I think the other speaker mentioned the issue of regulation as whether that can be used to infuse and change culture. I think in some part of the world, it can work in a place where the regulatory and institutional framework to enforce work, maybe in Europe and in developed countries. In developing economies, it doesn't work like that. Where the institutional framework is weak, the regulations are there, the enforcement mechanism is poor. So regulation does not work in such a system. Maybe the other approach that has been used in those systems is a reward systems, and then one cap does not fit all. In some part, yes, regulation enforcement works. In other part, maybe reward mechanisms otherwise, culture is quite deep to change. Maybe some reward mechanisms can actually change culture in developing economies. In developed countries, yes. So one cap doesn't actually fit all. Yeah.
So that was a good one on the list then. So if Esther just had balancing realism and optimism, then what you're saying is that in some cultures, great examples actually work better than regulation, and vice versa. So maybe that's another one of these paradigms, or sort of, what do you call them? They're not dichotomies, but they're sort of pairs in a sense. How much do you need it? That comes back to your speculative examples as well.
Yeah, so, and to add to that also, I just to resonate what Esther and Joseph just said, and to not resonate with you a little bit more, but I would say first we can't just say the word business, right? We need to break it down. Some are very, very for profit, and drilling oil right now as we speak, and some are non-profit. So we need to like open the spectrum up and have some kind of a label. But I want to give everyone a healthy, especially student, healthy dose of criticality, because that's what we need. A lot of businesses are doing greenwashing, this carbon offsetting and net zero things are just labels, and now it has become marketing ploys. And that's double the danger, because we're saying we're doing good for the climate, but same money and energy is being and not happening. So it's a double negative problem which is happening at the same time. So we need a healthy dose of criticality while we approach this, and especially when you're new to it, and being from a non-expert perspective, it's good to ask these questions. But like, what does it really mean?
Yeah. Can I be even more critical on that?
Please.
Or actually push you even further? Because I think it's something that's quite interesting for me is when I listen to our students, they're actually questioning if, or I think they're really looking for an education that teaches a mindset of sustainable future. And that's one thing, maybe, how do we, somehow the starting point, how do we make people want a change? They need that before they can be critical about something, right?
Right.
So, and that goes for every one of us, I think, before we go from just having facts to doing something about it. It's actually, we need to, have that mindset to want to be thinking in a more sustainable way before it helps with criticality. Then, so maybe your pair would be the mindset versus the critical thinking, the wish or the
and also not everyone has the same mindset, right? Everyone comes from different places, different families. Even inside Finland, for example, it's not the same, right? So understanding people have different capacities and different ways of learning. And from there, I would say, learn by doing and break the mold of the classroom. Let's go to a recycling center. Let's see their life. Let's see what's happening. Let's see where the thing I threw, the toaster I threw last week, where it has ended up and what's happening of it. And also then knowing what parts of them are going to a global south place where, when I saw the whole video, it kind of made me understand, okay, so this is the ramifications. But again, I'm giving one example. There are different ways, because what I said before, people have different ways of learning. I would invite other people to add to it.
But I think you're actually talking about the same thing that Risto talked about. So you're in a sense, you're exploding his pipage. You're sort of going out there and trying to find a new way of doing it.
I think it's exploding on its own. It is. I mean, it is, the pipeline are already exploding, right? And what I'm trying to say, like, we are putting these bandages around, and I also acknowledge that we cannot just take the whole pipe out at the same time, because then it's going to be chaos, right? I acknowledge that. I'm not saying we go for a revolt and just go on the streets. So it's not that, right? It is taking a step back, and again, now bringing in what we were talking earlier, some kind of like the design tools which we have in our arsenal, right? Like understanding mindsets. What mindsets are people coming with? Are they coming with, again, all of us here are already believe that there's a problem and that we are trying to solve it, right? But there are a lot of people who would say, circular economy, we're wasting our time. And then some would be even like, so that they don't even know this is happening, right? So I would say first we start understanding what kind of mindsets are we dealing with here in Finland, back home in India for me, or every other place we are all coming from. And then start there, and then for each mindset, and again, now we take it back to the classroom, then we take the student mindset. I mean, reading through all this actually was so good for me also to, like, again, building, okay, these are the mindsets we're coming with. Then we need to, as teachers, as who are also learning from them, kind of like, okay, for this mindset, we will do this activity, or we will, bring in some, breaking the reading about it, or giving these carbon numbers, or 0.5 degrees. These things don't work on everyone, clearly, right? So, I would start there.
So it's more than a pair then. So it's understanding the situation, it's imagining what it could be, but it's more than that. It's trying it out. What you're saying, making your hands dirty, and actually doing something about it. So we're almost doing a circular panel in the sense we started in the beginning saying that facts alone won't be enough, but we actually taking action on it is what matters. So it's all of those steps that sounds like you're heading for. Sorry, Joseph, you wanted to say something.
I think the concept of mindset is very strong. Is your personality. Even in terms of circular economy, the same principle applies. If I'm going to change my mindset, my belief about circularity, two things can change it. One, if there is an incentive to change that position of view. If that incentive is there, yes, it's possible. Then, secondly, if I will change my mindset, there must be a superior knowledge, superior argument that can overcome the current mindset. It's my personality, it's my belief, it's my conviction about circularity. So, one thing, incentives to change. Two, superior knowledge, superior argument, which comes to the same thing we're talking about, learning. This is our lifelong learning here.
So let me, I'm slow. I have to do this so that I get them. So first you have the incentive to change, then you have a superior idea.
Argument, knowledge.
Superior knowledge.
Argument, yeah.
And then you actually take action on it.
Yes, actually, yeah.
So I think this was super good. Superior knowledge,
yeah,
and then action. Because I think this could translate to all of us, couldn't it? It's sort of, if we first have the incentive to change, I think that's the challenge for many of us, that we know, but we still keep on doing exactly what we do. So we might be sort of on the level of superior knowledge at the moment, but it's still the step that's needed to be taken, that we actually all change. But it was really interesting to me what you said with the first one, the incentive to change, because you said when that shifted into superior knowledge, it was your willingness to take in that new, that you didn't know.
That's true.
And I think then we also get back to the whole learning point. So how can we generate this wish of understanding the other, of understanding, not being so firm in our own, I know how this is how it should be done, whether it's my field, my culture, my institution, but open up, be sort of open-minded, broad-minded enough to actually admit, because it's tough to admit, that is actually superior information or knowledge, like you said.
Yes.
And then take action. So it's also being humble, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I think every human being, once we have superior argument, as long as we are sincere with ourselves, as long as we're not sincere, if we're sincere, once there's a superior argument and we're also sincere, we will take action. We'll take action.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're not sincere.
But we want to be right always, as well, don't we? Right? So how can we get that humbleness that we are? Maybe that's the radical creativity, that we're so capable of seeing others and others' approaches that we're actually.
I think it's the key that Gordon said about doing, that you also emphasized, that it's not about knowledge. I think the pandemic also taught us this, that, we might have the superior knowledge and the things but the world doesn't work so that everybody just listens to the truth and acts like that. But I think the key to answering that is to start doing things, start meeting people, start, breaking things in a good way, and then learning and finding the path, because that obviously makes you meet other people and see the obstacles. So the kind of the personality, the personal experience of changing the world becomes very important. And not just the book knowledge that universities tell that this is the truth. So it's absolutely, we need to kind of put knowledge in its own position as super important. But to complement the knowledge, we need to really embrace cultural factors, but also people's individual, personal experiences and motivations and all of this to make change. Knowledge doesn't make change in itself.
I think that was a beautiful way to finish on a panel that's given by a university, saying that knowledge is not what we should focus on. Isn't that's controversy in itself. But I think you pulled it together really beautifully, saying that it's actually meeting others, meeting other cultures, meeting other standpoints, and experience was the one that you put up. And I think that ties it back to the doing. So I think that was actually a really brilliant way of bringing all of your opinions together. And I'm hoping that that's answering a little bit about what you were after as well, that it is the culture. I mean, isn't that sort of moving, maybe that's one of the things that we can take out of all of your talks, is that it's not, you said not knowledge and you said not facts, but it's really something that we're trying to grasp here, where it's more than just having facts and figures or having knowledge, but it's then being open-minded enough, being broad-minded, you called it in different ways, meeting others, what you called it, then having the experience, which you can only get if you actually do something. I don't think you can get an experience on an abstract theoretical level only. So that's maybe a good way of trying to sum up this. It's been really intriguing. I think we've had a very interesting, actually, hour and 15 minutes together, where we started off with an area which was super difficult to tackle, if you ask me. How do we train and educate for the future? You've come as far as saying that we ditch knowledge, or at least that we don't put new knowledge alone in the focal point, but that we meet each other, we're more open-minded than we are in our everyday. We take action, we experience it, and through that, maybe we come back to what the audience was saying, that we can actually change the culture, which again, circularly enough, gives us back, changing the institutions, changing the regulation, changing individual action, getting better businesses and so on. I think that's a brilliant thought. I think maybe for all of us, it's really about thinking of what we can do about it. But I want to activate you once more, though, in a last one, because I think this has been a lot about new understanding and so on. And it's so easy to talk here, to say that we should throw out knowledge, facts and figures, and never come to the point of having the experience and so on. I'd like you to raise your hand if you are in a position where you think you can recruit new people or act as a mentor. If you're able to do both, raise your hands. I see 2 hands over there, plenty of hands. Almost everyone in the audience are raising their hands. You are all capable of recruiting new people or mentoring people around you. If that's the thing, then please, next time when you are recruiting or mentoring, think of this as one opportunity for taking action, for opening up your mind, for, meeting others, as Risto said. Choose someone who's not with exactly your own insight. I don't care if it's your field, if it's your culture, if it's your age, if it's whatever you think. But if we keep replicating what we are and what we do, I think we lack a little bit of that you were talking about, that broad-mindedness of seeing the other, of seeing options, of seeing other viewpoints in. And I hope that's a way also for all the brilliant people that all the universities, not only ours, is educating in the world all around, to get new opportunities, to try their wings, because truly it is within our students that the future lies. And if we can give them opportunities to find solutions into these, I think we're all taking at least baby steps into to creating a better future, and hopefully all of us taking daily steps in changing things towards the better, because I fully agree with all of you. We've had plenty of time. So now I think, and even for this panel, we've had all of the time that we have. We're up with our time, but I hope we've inspired you, at least a little bit, all of you, to take action. So with that, we have had a great discussion and we are running out of time, but I think we can continue this discussion. So we actually have, tomorrow there's going to be continuous, Aalto University also has a session on the wardrobe of the future, on how to change the textiles and fashion industry. But as part of that, I think I'd love to continue the discussion with all of you. So there's an opportunity, if you want to join us shortly for, let's see where it's called. It's called the Future Wardrobe Exhibition in the Networking and Expo area. And you've been promised light refreshments for the first ones of you who attend, if you want to continue the discussion there, because I think it feels like we only got started. We could have gone on for as long as we ever had. So thank you very much. Gurdon, Joseph, Esther, Risto, all of us, and all of you who've been active in the audience. I hope to continue the discussion with all of you at the Wardrobe of the Future exhibition just around the corner. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Excellent.